What up, Mikey's crew? It's your good friend Michael here. Welcome, sports fans, to another edition of Sports Talk as well. Today's episode, it's going to be a lot shorter than recent past. We don't have a Michigan game, obviously, to talk about, but we will recap the MAC championship game, talk about the new college football playoff rankings, what the Final Four is. We'll talk about Western's bowl game a little bit, but we're not going to preview all the bowls today. We're actually going to do that over a week-by-week period. So starting next week, we'll talk about the bowls going on that week, and then we'll do that for the consecutive weeks then there after that, instead of doing one big whole bowl preview show at once. And we'll also run down the NFL scoreboard, talk about the standings there and what the playoff situations are for some of the teams. But let's first off talk about the MAC championship game, Western Michigan versus Ohio. Western, of course, came into this game and looking to complete a perfect season in non-conference play and Mid-American Conference play as well. So with the win, Western, is probably most likely going to the Cotton Bowl, although we still had to wait till Saturday to see if Navy would lose to Temple, which they did. It wasn't even close, by the way, in that game. I think it was like 34-10 ended up being the final that Temple won by. Navy, unfortunately, had a couple of players that got injured in that game, the running back and their quarterback. That did not help them. But Temple was already up by a couple of touchdowns, I think, before they even got hurt. So it looked like Temple was going to win the game no matter what happened at that point. And once that happened, we pretty much knew Western's going to the Cotton Bowl. There was no other Group of 5 team around. Nobody probably thought, oh, they're going to put Temple ahead of Western after that. No, I mean, Temple had 3 losses. Then we're talking about not only a 2-loss team, but a 3-loss team trying to jump Western. But there was no doubt at that point they were heading off to the Cotton Bowl to take on Wisconsin because they were the loser of the Big Ten championship game, which is going to be the team that Western is going to play. So we don't have to worry about a Western-Michigan matchup. Michigan's going to end up playing Florida State in a bowl game. I forgot the name of it. It's either the Capital One Bowl or the Gator Bowl, I think, that they're facing, and we'll talk about that coming up here. But anyways, I didn't get to see most of the first quarter due to I was still trying to park the car at that point. I didn't get out of work, or my wife didn't get out of work till 4, and I ended up missing like an exit on the highway I should have taken, or else we probably would have gotten there on time for the game and just maybe missed like the first couple of plays. But because of my error, we ended up missing most of the first quarter. I had actually dropped my wife off and said, go to the will call, get the tickets, I'll go get the parking spot. She ended up getting the tickets before I even got the parking spot, so that shows you just how long it would have taken if she had, stayed with me throughout that entire process. So we got in. Western was up 6-0 at that point. They kicked 2 field goals. They kicked another field goal to make it 9-0 before Ohio scored a touchdown to make it 9-7. I believe Zach Terrell had thrown an interception to set up Ohio at that point. Then Western ended up scoring 2 more touchdowns. Corey Davis had I think it was an 84-yard touchdown catch to put Western up 16-7, and then Western got another touchdown to make it 23-7 on a Zach Terrell pass down by the goal line. And it looked like at halftime going in, Western was going to run away with this game in the second half. However, Ohio came back. They ended up scoring another touchdown to make it Ohio's first touchdown, was not off of a Terrell interception. They had a long pass that set them up down by the goal line. Terrell's interception came in the second half, which set up Ohio's touchdown to make it 23-14. Actually 23-13 because the kicker missed the extra point. Western kicked the field to make it 26-13. Ohio scores another touchdown to make it 26-20. They then kick a field goal in the fourth. Western kicks one to make it 29-23. But then Ohio got the ball. They drove all the way down to about the 40-yard line of Western before they threw an interception, which was picked up by Robert Spillane. It sealed the victory, and Western went away MAC champions. Ohio, well-fought, hard game there against Western. Western, hadn't played in a close game really since early in the season. I mean, yeah, they had been tested a little bit, against Northern Illinois. They've been tested against Kent State, but near the end of the game, they hadn't been tested really since the Northwestern game, if you go back and look at it. And you know who forced a turnover in that game? Robert Spillane. Clayton Thorson was running for the end zone. Robert Spillane forces a fumble to seal the game there as that rolled out of the end zone for a touchback, and then he seals the game here against Ohio. So, kind of bookending the season there, I kind of mentioned that in my recap of the game, immediate recap right after the game. So, let's get into the stats. Terrell didn't have his best day. 19 to 31 for 290 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he had 2 interceptions. So, that was the most he had in the game all year. He only has 3 interceptions to his name this year. On the other side, on Ohio, Greg Windham, 14 of 30 for 214 yards, 3 touchdowns, and the 1 interception that cost him in the end. Now, Western, wasn't able to run the ball very effectively. Ohio had only given up about 105 yards coming into the game. So Western, tried to run, but they could only muster 114 yards on the ground. 78 by Jamari Bogan on 26 carries. Franklin, 9 for 34. But Ohio could not run the ball either, which was a good thing to see that Western was able to stop that. They only had 37 yards rushing, so thank goodness Western was able to stop that rushing attack there as well. Corey Davis on the day, his touchdown was 70 yards. I gave him 14 yards too many. 8 receptions, 144 yards, a touchdown. Carrington Thompson, 6 receptions, 72 yards, and a touchdown as well. So that was great to see for Western, to see them do well, win the MAC title, and now go on to the Cotton Bowl. But them kicking field goals like that when getting down toward the red zone really did remind me of the Northwestern game, where they would drive down to the red zone and kick field goals instead of converting for touchdowns. So it's kind of weird that the first game and the last game kind of had the same exact feeling to it. So on the day, Western had 20 first downs to Ohio's 14. 404 yards of offense for Western and 251 for Ohio. And that's what I'm talking about. They had all this offense, almost, Ohio didn't have a whole lot. The reason why Ohio ended up with the points they did was because of actually the one big play they had, the big pass play, and the one turnover. The one turnover that set up Ohio for a touchdown. They were able to force another turnover but did not score on it. But if Western scores touchdowns instead of field goals, this game actually is not even that close. Western was only 4 of 15 on third downs. That did hurt. Ohio 5 of 12. So Western 290 through the air to 214 for Ohio. 114 on the ground for Western to 37 for Ohio. The penalties, now this was the thing that really did hurt Western as well. 10 penalties, 76 yards. Most penalized game, I'm pretty sure, all year for the Broncos. 2 penalties, 16 yards for Ohio. I did really think the refs were kind of biased toward Western. There was a pass interference call over a pass over the middle downfield that I thought Western's, had good coverage on. They didn't even touch the Ohio receiver. There was another one where Ohio's quarterback got hit, threw it up in the air, and it landed in between a bunch of receivers. It was uncatchable, it really looked like, and there was a pass interference call on that. There also seemed to be a targeting call that was missed on Michael Henry, so Ohio did not get penalized for that. I really thought the refs did keep the game a little closer than what it should have been as well. Ohio had 3 turnovers to Western's 2. Western had the ball for 37 minutes, 52 seconds to 22 minutes, 8 seconds for Ohio. So Western once again controlled the ball, controlled the clock, and they ended up coming out with a victory. And now, like I said, January 2nd, 1 p.m. on ESPN, they'll be in the Cotton Bowl taking on Wisconsin. So they got a huge test ahead of them there against the Badgers. They're really going to have to shut down that running game, because that's gonna be the key thing. If they can stop Corey Clement and the run game, they've got a very good chance to beat Wisconsin, because I don't think whoever they put in at quarterback, Hornibrook or Bart Houston, they're going to beat Western through the air. I don't think that's going to happen. If they do beat them through the air, then they do. They just happen to have one of those games. But Western's going to have to really, stop Corey Clement. They're going to have to control the clock, too. These are two teams that really like to run the ball and control the clock. So something's going to give in this. Either Western's going to control the clock or Wisconsin's going to control the clock. And if Western can move the ball and Wisconsin can control the clock, then the game is going to be in their favor. It's just going to be like Northwestern, where if they can sustain long drives and maybe come away with touchdowns, they can win, because Wisconsin's defense is going to be on the field a lot. And Penn State really showed something in the Big Ten championship game, where they were able to throw the ball downfield on Wisconsin. If Western can do that with Corey Davis, Carrington Thompson, Michael Henry, Western has a good chance to keep the game close against Wisconsin. If they can't pass the ball, they're not going to be able to run it, I think, on that defensive line of Wisconsin. And if they can't protect Zach Terrell, they're going to be in trouble all day. So that's the thing. Western's going to have to protect Terrell, find someone to move the ball through the air because I don't think on the ground they're going to be able to do it, and they're going to have to stop the Wisconsin running game. So let's run through the other scores from this past weekend. The Pac-12 championship game, Washington beat Colorado 41-10. Alabama was all over Florida in the SEC championship game 54-16. Clemson defeated Virginia Tech 42-35 in the ACC championship game. Penn State trailed 28-7 at one point to Wisconsin, came back and beat the Badgers 38-31 in the Big Ten championship game. In the de facto Big 12 championship game, Oklahoma took down Oklahoma State in the Bedlam affair 38-20, and Temple defeated Navy 34-10 in the American Athletic Championship game. Now, there are some other scores. Let's run down those as well. We'll run down really the championship scores, the ones that kind of mattered. Although if a team did become bowl eligible, we'll also mention that here as well. Let's see here. Western Kentucky defeated Louisiana Tech in the Conference USA Championship game. No defense was played. 58-44 the final there. South Alabama became bowl eligible and defeated New Mexico State 35-28. Louisiana Lafayette became bowl eligible as they defeated Louisiana Monroe 30-3. San Diego State also won the Mountain West Championship game 27-24. Donnell Pumphrey, by the way, needs, I think, 108 yards total left to break Ron Dane's record of the all-time rushing mark in NCAA football history. So imagine that if the receiving record already fell. Corey Davis got that. Imagine if the rushing record also fell in the same year. That would be quite a mark, I would have to say. Now, I forgot to mention, let's also talk about the Heisman Trophy finalists, because there are 5 finalists that were named that are going to go to New York. And I'm going to tell you what, there was one guy that was left off of this that should not have been left off, especially since this guy actually had better stats than since this guy actually had better stats than one of the players that actually ended up going. Now, granted, the player that did end up going, and I'm going to say his name, D.D. Westbrook now, did have less receptions but more yards, and maybe they saw that he had a better average per catch than what Corey Davis did, and that's who I think should have went. But here's the thing. Corey Davis, I think, had 91 receptions on the year, over 1,400 yards receiving, and I think he had 19 touchdowns. Whereas D.D. Westbrook had 74 yards receiving, or 74 receptions for about the same amount of receiving yards, and I think 2 less touchdowns than what Davis had. And maybe the committee and maybe the people that selected it was like, well, he plays for Oklahoma, he plays in a better conference, and he had all these yards on less receptions, and maybe that's why they gave it to him. But in my opinion, I think it should have been Corey Davis should have been invited. I mean, number one, he broke the all-time receiving mark this year in college football. Yeah, number 2, he has more receptions, which means they found him more than what Oklahoma found D.D. Westbrook. He has more touchdowns, and he has spectacular touchdown catches this year. All things that could be added up in the Heisman. Well, here's your 5 finalists. Baker Mayfield, Oklahoma's quarterback. Lamar Jackson, quarterback for Louisville. D.D. Westbrook, wide receiver for Oklahoma. Deshaun Watson, quarterback for Clemson. And Jabril Peppers, kind of the guy who does everything for Michigan, because I don't know what you would say. He plays defense, he plays offense, he plays special teams, he plays everywhere. Tell you what right now, D.D. Westbrook will probably end up dead last in the voting. Receivers don't usually win the Heisman. Jabril Peppers probably winds up 4th, just because, they didn't win the game against Ohio State. He didn't have a big game there. He did have 1 interception, but he didn't do a whole lot else. He did do some spectacular things in other games, but I don't think he wins it either. Probably Baker Mayfield finishes 3rd on this list. Deshaun Watson finishes 2nd. And your winner is probably Lamar Jackson. Although I could see Deshaun Watson getting it just because of the fact he did lead his team to a title, whereas Lamar Jackson didn't, and his stock kind of did fall in December. However, I still think Lamar Jackson does win it just based on how he was playing earlier in the year. But I still am a little upset that Corey Davis was not invited. I think he should have been invited over D.D. Westbrook. Do I think Corey Davis would have won it if he was invited? No, I don't think he would have been. He probably still would have finished 5th out of this group if he was the number 5, selection. So I don't think he'd have won it, but I think it'd have been nice if he would have been able to get invited to go there because like I said, he broke the all-time receiving record. He had better stats than Westbrook this year. I don't know why he wasn't there. And also, ESPN came out with like a top 50 list of the best players in college football, an end-of-the-year list, and Corey Davis was also not included on that list. I thought complete disrespect. I mean, he at least deserved to be on there. I think Zach Terrell at least deserved to be mentioned for the list, and possibly also Jarvion Franklin, because he's had a good year at running back. Western has some good players on the team, but they're not getting any recognition. And you know what? I know Coach Fleck isn't all about the individual awards, and he's like, hey, we're just here playing as a team, and that's fine, but I'm saying as a fan, these players definitely should be recognized. By the way, Coach P.J. Fleck also a finalist for the Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year award. I think what he's done at Western Michigan, leading them from 1-11 campaign 4 years ago to a 13-0 campaign, he should win it. Do I think he will win it? Probably not. It's probably going to go to somebody else. If Mike McIntyre is one of the finalists, he might end up winning it just because what he did at Colorado, taking him from one win in the Pac-12 to a conference championship bid this year. I think he would probably end up winning it. But, I mean, it's like the same story except at a bigger university. But at a smaller university, I think it's harder to do it. And that's why I think P.J. Fleck deserves to win the award. So, there you go. That's my take on the Heisman. Let's talk about now the college football final playoff rankings. So here's your final top 10. Well, first of all, I'll mention where Western ended up. They ended up 15 in the rankings, so they moved up, I think, from what they started 23, but then for 3 straight weeks they were at 21, and they should have been moving up, and they weren't. They were getting leapfrogged by teams that shouldn't have been leapfrogging them, and then, it was just back and forth. It was ridiculous. So Auburn, Louisville, Oklahoma State, Florida State, teams that have 3 and 4 losses still all ended up in front of Western. I think they should have at least ended up 11th, heading into the final rankings. So your final top 10 was Colorado, USC, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Michigan, and Penn State were 5 and 6. They get left out. So your playoffs are Alabama versus Washington, Clemson versus Ohio State. I'm not going to mention who I'm predicting to win right now. We'll talk about that once it comes up to the week of the playoff. We'll do a preview of the games then. Do I think the top 4 they got in here deserve to get in? Alabama, obviously, hands down, was in. I even think if they lost to Florida, they were in. Clemson, they deserve to be in as well. Ohio State. This is where you could argue, I don't know about them, because they didn't win a conference championship game. They didn't play in a conference championship game. But here's the thing I want to argue right now. If Ohio State and Penn State had, let's say, played week 1 of the season, and you can play conference games that early, and Ohio State had lost week 1 of the season to Penn State, and at that time, Penn State would have been an unranked team, but would have obviously been ranked after that game against Ohio State. And Ohio State wins all their games after that, goes 11 and 1. Does Ohio State still deserve to get in the playoff? Most likely, yes, even if they wouldn't have been able to play for a conference championship game. So even with that loss to Penn State, if it had happened later in the year, maybe second to last game of the year, maybe they don't get in this playoff. It all depends on where they lost that game, and they lost to probably at the right time, to tell you the truth. Especially when they lost. And then, you had another week where Clemson, Washington, and Michigan all lost. If Michigan had, say, not lost to Iowa and had played that close of a game against Ohio State would have been 2. You probably had Michigan at 3 and Clemson at 4. But more than likely, Michigan would have been still left out of that playoff no matter what. The thing I could see happening is Penn State could have been put into the playoff and Washington would have been left out. That's who I see that really could have happened. I don't think Ohio State, you could have taken them out, especially going all the way from 2 to 5. I mean, then what you are saying is if you don't win a conference championship, you have no shot at getting in the playoff here. That's what the take could have been at that point. So basically what the college football playoff did do, they set a precedent saying that you don't have to necessarily win a conference championship to get into the playoff. And by the way, I'm sorry, Michigan is not playing in the Gator Bowl or the Capital One Bowl. I don't know why I even said that. Orange Bowl. Michigan is playing in the Orange Bowl against Florida State. So my bad on that one. By the way, I think they'll handle Florida State, but like I said, we'll do a preview when it comes up for that. But anyways, that's what I could have seen happen, is that you leave Washington out because of their weak non-conference schedule and because the Pac-12 really at the end of the year wasn't that great. But they beat a team inside the top 10 in the final weekend of the college football playoff ranking, but so did Penn State, you could say. And they beat a team that was ranked higher. I could have seen them putting Penn State in. Now, yes, they did get blown out to Michigan, but in that game, Penn State had defensive starters that were not able to play due to injuries. So you kind of got to say there, you got to look at that game maybe as an anomaly. And they lost to Pitt, who, by the way, beat Clemson. So maybe Penn State should have been number 4. Washington gets left out, but then Washington fans would have been griping too, saying we should be in. Ohio State shouldn't be in because they didn't play in a conference championship game. You got all these arguments that you could say. But no doubt Alabama, Clemson should be in, but you could definitely argue anywhere between Ohio State, Washington, Penn State, Michigan. Any of them could have been in. But because Ohio State lost or beat Michigan, you have to probably say Ohio State then would be in because of that, but Penn State should be in over Washington. There's too many arguments to go in. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Who do you think should be the number 4 team? Should it have been Penn State over Washington? Should Ohio State have even been in there? I don't know. It's totally up for debate. And this is why right now I'm going to lay out what I think should happen with the college football playoff. I think they should go from 4 teams to 8 teams. I don't know when they possibly could come out with that format, but they got to come out with it soon. Now I'm going to lay it on the line right now. The Power 5 champions, all 5 of them, get a spot in the playoff. All 5 get a spot in, so we don't go through this where you get one team left out. Which, by the way, one conference, there was one team, like I said, in here without a conference championship, and that's Ohio State. So really, you only have 3 conference champions out of the Power 5 in. Next, another spot goes to the highest group of 5 teams. So that way the group of 5 always can have a team in the playoff, every year. Now, granted, that group of 5 team is probably going to be playing the top seed every single year. It's not completely impossible that they wouldn't, but it is possible that would be. And then 2 at-large berths. So basically, what the playoff system would set up and be is you got your all 5 champions of the Power 5. You've got one group of 5 champion that the highest group of 5 champion is in, and the 2 at-large berths are the 2 highest teams ranked in the college football playoffs that is not a conference champion goes to the playoff. That's how the system should be set up. Now, you're probably thinking, well, what about Notre Dame? They're an independent. How do they get in? Well, how about this? Notre Dame can steal an at-large bid if they are ranked inside the top, I'll say 15. If you're an independent school and you do not have a conference affiliation, if you are ranked inside the top 15, you're automatically slotted into the college football playoff. So that means that Notre Dame could get in. That way that they're not left out. Now, if that the committee ever went to 8 teams, they might say instead of top 15, you have to be ranked in the top 10, and that way you're not ranked right at 15 and you get in. So this year's playoff, if it were 8 teams, would look like this: Alabama, Clemson, Washington, Penn State, and Oklahoma would be your 5 teams in. Western Michigan would be your group of 5 champion, and then your 2 highest non-champion teams in would be Ohio State and Michigan, and that would be your 8 teams going to the college football playoff. So there you go. So basically, you're talking the top 7 in the rankings right now would be in, along with Western Michigan. So that actually will work out pretty well for the college football playoff committee. So what would your matchups be then if you were to do this? You're obviously going to slot 1 versus 8, 2, 7, 3, 6, and 4, 5, and that's how you're going to set it up. And 1 and 2 would obviously be separated down at the bottom. Well, it'd be Alabama versus Western, obviously, would be one matchup. Then you would have Clemson versus Oklahoma, This would be a great, oh gosh, first round matchup. Ohio State would be facing Michigan, and Washington would be facing Penn State. And those would be your matchups. That's what I'm talking about. Whatever the final college football playoff rankings is, you take 1, 8, 2, 7. You don't reseed them, anything like that. So yeah, Alabama versus Western, Clemson versus Oklahoma, Ohio State versus Michigan, and Washington versus Penn State. And it would probably end up being Alabama would advance, Clemson would advance, I'm going to say Michigan would advance, and probably you'd have Penn State advance. And so then you would have, however the bracket's set up, and that's what it would be. And that's why I think they should do an 18 playoff. So let's now just run down the NFL scoreboard really quickly, take a look at the standings, and then the playoff scenarios. Dallas defeated Minnesota on Thursday night, 17-15. How about the Chiefs? They win 29-28 over Atlanta. Atlanta scores a go-ahead touchdown, and then on a 2-point conversion play. Yeah, and then on a 2-point conversion play, Atlanta gets picked off, returned for a 2-point conversion for the Chiefs, and they win the game 29-28. How about the Lions? All the experts were picking the Saints, saying they're going to win. I don't care about what the Lions are doing right now. Ha! Lions win 28-13 over the Saints. On the road, might I add. Patriots defeat the Rams 26-10. Broncos double up the Jaguars 20-10. Packers win again. They defeat the Texans 21-13. Bengals pound the Eagles 32-14. Ravens all over the Dolphins 38-6. Bears, they're pathetic, but they beat the 49ers, who are even more pathetic, 26-6. Raiders come back to defeat the Bills 38-24, Steelers over the Giants 24-14. Cardinals defeat the Redskins 31-23. Chargers lose to the Buccaneers, who are red hot right now, 28-21. Seahawks pound the Panthers 40-7. The Colts do the same thing to the Jets. They pound them 41-10. So now let's take a look at the playoffs. Let's take a look at the standings, and then we'll look at the playoff scenarios as well. Patriots lead the AFC East with a 10-2 record. Dolphins sit in second at 7-5. Ravens, Steelers both tied at 7-5 in the AFC North. Texans, Colts, Titans all 6-6 in the AFC South. AFC West, Raiders lead with a 10-2 record. In the East, the Cowboys have already clinched a spot in the playoffs, lead the NFC East with 11-1 record. Lions 8-4 in the North. Vikings, Packers both 6-6. Falcons, Buccaneers both 7-5 in the NFC South, and in the NFC West, Seahawks lead with an 8-3-1 record. So let's take a look now at the playoff standings to just tell you what's going on there. Raiders have the 1 seed in the AFC East, or in the AFC right now, 10-2 record. Patriots also have a 10-2 record. Ravens lead the North, have a 7-5 record. Texans lead the South with that dismal 6-6 record. And your wild cards right now, Chiefs 9-3, Dolphins 8-4. Broncos 8-4. Dolphins, Steelers just sit outside with 7-5 records. Let's go to the NFC now. Cowboys 11-1, Seahawks 8-3-1. Those are your top 2 seeds. Lions have a 3 seed right now with an 8-4 record. Falcons are 7-5, and your wild cards: the Giants 8-4, the Buccaneers 7-5, Redskins 6-5-1, just sit outside the playoffs right now, along with the Vikings and Packers both 6-6, and the Cardinals 5-6-1. So here's the thing: what do the Lions have to do to make the playoffs? You might be wondering. Well, they're 8-4, and of course the Packers and the Vikings are both 6-6. If the Vikings lose one more game, they cannot win the division, even if the Lions were to finish 9-7, because the Lions defeated them twice. Now, the Packers are going to have to lose twice for the Lions to clinch the division. Why? Because the Packers right now hold the tiebreaker over the Lions, and they do not face each other until the last week of the regular season. Now, the Lions have got tough games coming up right now. They're 8-4. They're playing really well. They could have other wins this year. I'm telling you what. They've lost to the Texans. They've lost to the Titans, and it's unfortunate they lost to both those teams. They lost to the Bears. The Packers, you can understand they were down big early in that game. Lions could actually have a one-loss team this year, but they've got 4 losses. They're playing better now. That's great to see. So their last 4 games, they faced the Giants, the Cowboys, the Bears, and the Packers. Not in that order. They play the Bears this weekend. They have a chance to go to 9-4. If the Vikings lose, they're out of the division race. If the Packers lose, they're almost certainly out of it because the Lions would need to win one more game to clinch. However, after they play the Bears, then they play the Giants, the Cowboys, and finish up with the Packers. So the Lions have got to continue winning if they want to clinch the division. You don't want to fall out of it, but a playoff berth, could be almost certain at this point, but you don't want to say that just yet. So that'll wrap up this edition of Sports Talk. I want to thank you for watching and thank you for subscribing. If you haven't drop a thumbs on this video if you enjoyed it. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more content. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Links are in the description below. And until next time, this is Michael out and over and out. Mikey's crew, you guys are the best. Take care. We'll talk to you again next week.